On the Mediterranean coast, 45 kilometers west of Alexandria, a ruined temple stands on a ridge between a dead lake and the sea. The Greeks called the place Taposiris Magna. The name translates as the Great Tomb of Osiris, the god who died and was buried and did not stay gone. In November of 2022, archaeologists working inside that temple announced something no survey had predicted. 13 meters below the ground, cut clean through solid rock, ran a tunnel 1,305 meters long, tall enough for a person to walk upright, driven in a straight line toward the sea. Part of it is underwater. Nobody knows yet where it ends. The team that found it was not looking for a tunnel. For almost 2 decades they have been looking for a body. The most famous missing body in the ancient world. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, died in August of the year 30 BCE, and every schoolbook on earth tells you exactly how. A snake, hidden in a basket of figs, pressed to her arm in a locked room, while Roman soldiers stood outside. It is one of the most repeated death scenes in human history. It is also, when you read the earliest sources line by line, a story that does not hold together. And the stranger fact sits underneath it. Rome recorded her burial. Rome described her tomb, and in 2,000 years, no one has ever found it. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Start with the version you already know, because the crack runs right through the middle of it. In the story, Alexandria has fallen. Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, has taken the city. Antony is dead by his own sword. Cleopatra is held under guard in her own mausoleum, a tomb she built for herself beside a temple of Isis in the royal quarter, and she knows what waits for her in Rome. A triumph, a parade. The last queen of Egypt walked in chains past a jeering crowd. So she bathes, dresses in her royal robes, eats a final meal, and has a countryman deliver a basket of figs past the guards. Under the fruit coils an Egyptian cobra. When Octavian's men break down the door, she is lying dead on a golden couch in full regalia. Her attendant Iris is dying at her feet. Her attendant Charmian, barely standing, is straightening the diadem on the dead queen's brow. A soldier snaps at her that this is a fine piece of work. Charmian answers that it is the finest possible and fitting for the descendant of so many kings, and then she falls. It is a perfect scene, almost too perfect, and here is the first thing the schoolbooks leave out. The man who wrote it down admitted he did not know if it was true. The scene comes to us mainly from Plutarch, a Greek biographer writing his Life of Antony roughly 130 years after the event. Plutarch was a careful writer with good sources. He drew on the memoir of Olympos, Cleopatra's own physician, who attended her in those final days. And Plutarch, having told the snake story in full, does something historians rarely quote. He lists the other versions. Some said the asp was carried in among flowers, not figs. Some said there was no asp at all, and that the queen carried poison in a hollow ornament in her hair. He records that when the room was searched, no snake was ever found inside it. Some claimed faint marks were seen on her arm, and others denied even that. Then he closes the account with a sentence that should be printed beside every painting of the queen and the serpent. The truth of the matter, he writes, no one knows. Cassius Dio, writing later still, says the same in his own way. Nothing was certain except 2 small punctures that some observers reported on her arm, and even those he presents as one claim among several. The most famous death in ancient history rests on sources that tell you in plain language that they are guessing. Now put the scene itself under weight, because this is where the standard account starts to fail on its own terms. 3 women died in that room, and they died fast. Octavian, when he learned Cleopatra intended to kill herself, sent men running to stop it, and the distance was short. By the time they arrived, the queen was dead, 1 attendant was dead, and the 3rd was seconds from it. An Egyptian cobra is a real animal with real limits. Its venom kills by paralysis, and in an adult it usually takes hours, not minutes. Death that quick from a single bite would be unusual for 1 person. For 3 people, one after another, from 1 snake concealed under figs, the arithmetic stops working. A cobra large enough to carry that much venom is well over a meter of visible, angry animal, a difficult thing to hide in a fruit basket carried past soldiers specifically watching for exactly this. And after the deaths, the creature simply vanishes from a sealed room. Plutarch says some claimed a serpent's trail was seen near a window facing the sea. He reports it the way you report a rumor. In 2010, the German historian Christoph Schäfer of the University of Trier worked through the problem with the toxicologist Dietrich Mebs, and their conclusion was blunt. Cobra venom does not fit the reported timeline, and a drinkable mixture would. Hemlock, aconite, and opium were all available in Alexandria, all known to royal physicians, and a queen who had famously studied poisons for years would have known that a snake bite promised hours of paralysis, while a prepared draft promised a quiet, quick, almost painless end. The physical evidence in the sources points to poison. The snake points somewhere else. It points to Rome and to Egypt at the same time. And this is the part of the story that turns it from a mystery into something colder. Strabo, the geographer, is the closest thing we have to a contemporary witness. He was in Egypt within a few years of her death, walking the same city, and he gives two versions side by side, the bite of an asp or a poisonous ointment, and declines to choose. Which means that within living memory of the event, in Alexandria itself, nobody agreed on how the queen died. Yet within a year, one version had already been made official. In 29 BCE, Octavian celebrated his triumph in Rome, and since he could not parade the living queen, he paraded an effigy of her instead, and the effigy came with a snake fixed to her arm. That image, carried through the streets of Rome by the man who defeated her, is the earliest hard appearance of the asp in the record. The victor did not just write the history, he built the scene and put it on a float, and the choice of animal did double work. To a Roman crowd, the serpent read as something exotic and Eastern and fatal, everything they had been told about her. To an Egyptian, it read completely differently. The cobra was the uraeus, the goddess Wadjet, the rearing serpent on the brow of every pharaoh, and death by its bite was an old idea of royal transfiguration, the crown itself taking its ruler home. A snake death made Cleopatra a legend Rome could sell, and a goddess Egypt could accept, and it conveniently required no discussion of poison, of access, of timing, or of who exactly allowed a basket through the door of the most closely guarded prisoner in the Mediterranean. Some modern writers push one step further and ask whether Octavian needed her dead more than he needed her paraded, since a living Cleopatra was a living claim on Egypt and the mother of Caesar's only blood son. That is a theory, and I will flag it as one. Nothing in the sources proves a Roman hand in that room. What the sources do prove is that the man who controlled every account of that room had already killed her teenage son Caesarion, and had every reason to prefer a beautiful myth to an autopsy. And there is one more detail from Plutarch that historians tend to read too quickly, because it cuts in both directions at once. He records that in her final years, Cleopatra ran what can only be called a research program. She collected lethal drugs and venomous animals and tested them, on condemned prisoners according to the account, watching how each one killed, timing the agony, comparing the outcomes. Her conclusion, Plutarch says, was that the bite of the asp brought the gentlest end, a heaviness like sleep, with no convulsions and no disfigured face. Read one way, that passage is the seed of the whole snake legend, the queen choosing the death she had personally graded best. Read the other way, it is the profile of a woman who knew more about poison than almost anyone alive, who had catalogued exactly which mixtures worked and how fast, and who would never have needed to gamble her last hour on whether a frightened animal in a fruit basket felt like biting 3 separate people on schedule. The expertise that makes the legend plausible is the same expertise that makes it unnecessary. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one, because here is what almost nobody notices about the aftermath. Rome told us what happened to the body. Plutarch records that Octavian, whatever his feelings, allowed Cleopatra to be buried with royal honors, laid beside Antony in the mausoleum she had built, the same building she died in, beside the temple of Isis in the palace quarter of Alexandria. That is not a vague detail. It is a location, and the building itself appears in the record as a solid, physical thing. It was unfinished but standing when the city fell, 2 levels high, with a sealed lower door and upper windows, and Cleopatra had packed it with her treasury, gold, pearls, ebony, and ivory, along with enough timber and pitch to burn it all if Rome came too close. When Antony fell on his sword and learned she still lived, his men carried him to that building, and because the door stayed sealed, the dying man was hauled up by ropes through an upper window into the arms of the queen. Real ropes, a real window, a real wall. Ancient readers knew this building the way we know famous landmarks. The tomb of the last pharaoh was a known, standing, visitable building in the most famous city of the ancient world. Emperors went to Alexandria and paid their respects at the tomb of Alexander the Great, which stood in the same royal district. The city did not misplace its monuments casually, and yet today we have no tomb, no sarcophagus, no mummy, no fragment of an inscription that says, "Here lies Cleopatra." For a queen whose face survives on coins across 3 continents, the silence in the ground is total. So the honest question is not whether the tomb existed. The sources say it did. The question is what the earth did with it, and on that point the geology of Alexandria has a brutal answer. The royal quarter was built on the edge of the harbor, on ground that was slowly failing. Earthquakes shook the coast again and again through late antiquity, and in 365 CE a quake near Crete sent a tsunami over the city that ancient writers describe as a day the sea left the harbor and then returned over the rooftops. The shoreline dropped. Entire districts, palaces, temples, and the island of Antirhodos with them, slid under the water of what is now the Eastern Harbor. Beginning in 1992, the French underwater archaeologist Franck Gaudiot mapped that drowned ground, and his divers brought up sphinxes, columns, pavements, and a granite head, believed by some scholars to show Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra's own father, all of it lying a few meters down in murky harbor water. Somewhere in or near that submerged royal district, most Egyptologists will tell you, is where the mausoleum stood. Zahi Hawass, the most famous face of Egyptian archaeology, has said for years that in his view the queen lies near her palace, under the water or under the modern city, and may never be found. That is the orthodox answer, and it is a reasonable one. It is also, and this needs to be said plainly, an answer no one has ever been able to test. The harbor floor is vast, the visibility is poor, the city above is dense and alive, and no structure identified as the mausoleum has ever been located. The official position on Cleopatra's tomb is a shrug pointed at the sea, which brings us back to the ridge west of the city and to the person who refused to accept the shrug. Kathleen Martinez is a Dominican lawyer who taught herself Egyptology out of something close to obsession and, in 2005, talked Egypt's antiquities authorities into letting her test a theory at Taposiris Magna. Her argument starts with something Plutarch documents directly. Cleopatra did not merely rule as a queen, she presented herself, formally and publicly, as the new Isis, appearing in the sacred dress of the goddess, and Antony was staged as her divine consort, the living echo of Osiris. In the old story, Isis gathers the body of the murdered Osiris and buries him in secret, in a tomb hidden from his enemy. Martinez asks a simple question. If you were the new Isis, hunted by an enemy who intended to drag your body's memory through Rome, would you let yourself be buried in the most visible building in Alexandria, or would you do what Isis did, and hide your Osiris where the enemy would never look? And there on the coast, a half-day from the city, stood a fortified temple, whose very name is the Tomb of Osiris. It is a theory, she has never claimed otherwise, but it is a theory that has been paying rent. Her excavations have pulled bronze coins from the temple ground carrying Cleopatra's name and face, an alabaster head, foundation plaques showing the temple was dedicated under Ptolemy IV to Osiris, shrines to Isis, and outside the walls a Greco-Roman cemetery in which the dead were laid facing the temple, the way ancient people were buried facing something holy. In 2021, the mission opened burials there containing mummies with tongues of gold foil, placed in the mouth so the dead could speak before the court of Osiris. Ordinary provincial temples do not gather that kind of gravity. People wanted to be buried looking at this place. Something inside it mattered more than the standard maps admit. Then came the tunnel. In 2022, Martinez's team, working with Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, announced the discovery beneath the temple precinct of that rock-cut passage, 1,305 meters of it, 2 meters high, 13 meters down. An engineering feat the ministry itself compared to the famous tunnel of Eupalinos on the island of Samos, one of the most precise construction projects of the classical world. Inside it, the excavators found ceramic vessels and worked stone, and ahead of them they found water, because sections of the tunnel and of the coastline it runs toward are sunken, drowned by the same chain of earthquakes that took down Alexandria's royal quarter. The record shows more than 20 destructive quakes striking this coast between the 4th and 14th centuries. Whatever the tunnel was cut to reach, part of the answer now lies under the Mediterranean, and the mission's work has followed it there, with divers surveying submerged structures off the temple shore. And the site keeps producing arguments. Recently, a small white marble head of a woman wearing a royal diadem came out of the ground near the temple, and the dispute over it captures this whole story in miniature. Martinez looked at it and raised the possibility of Cleopatra. Senior Egyptologists, Hawass among them, looked at the same face and saw a Roman noblewoman, and said the theory of the queen's burial here remains unproven. Both things can be true at once. Nothing found at Taposiris Magna yet proves Cleopatra lies there, and nothing found in 2,000 years anywhere else proves she does not. So hold the two halves of this mystery side by side, because together they say something the schoolbook version never will. The death scene we all inherited was written by the winner, staged in his triumph with a prop snake, and contradicted on its own pages by the men who recorded it, while the chemistry of the reported deaths fits a prepared poison better than any cobra. And the tomb that Rome itself said existed has been allowed to dissolve into legend, either standing in silence under the harbor mud of Alexandria among the Sphinx's Gaudio's divers swim past, or hidden the way Isis hid Osiris, behind a temple wall on a ridge west of the city, above a tunnel that runs down into the sea. Before we go further, one thing should be said clearly, because this channel owes you that. Some of what you have heard tonight is solid and documented. The sources, the coins, the tunnel, the drowned quarter. Some of it is theory, and where it is, I have said so. The point is not to hand you a verdict. It is to show you what is actually in the record and let you decide what you think it means. What is beyond dispute is what remains open. The tunnel under Taposiris Magna has not given up its purpose or its endpoint. The submerged structures off that shore have not been fully explored. The eastern harbor of Alexandria still holds an entire royal district that no one has excavated and no one can, at least not yet, not at scale. Plutarch's sentence still stands after 19 centuries, that the truth of her death no one knows. And somewhere, under harbor silt or temple stone, in a mausoleum the sea swallowed, or a chamber a queen paid to keep secret, the last pharaoh of Egypt is still lying exactly where the year 30 BCE left her, beside her Antony if the sources are honest, unfound, unopened, and waiting for the one discovery that would rewrite the most famous ending in ancient history. The vault at Taposiris is still being cleared. The water is still holding what it took, and the queen who spent her life refusing to be paraded through Rome has, so far, refused for 2,000 years to be found. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.